One of the big things, and actually this wasn't on the original docket for today, but just given that it literally happened within the last 24 hours, I went ahead and chose to add it. Garmin was hit by ransomware, and it did cause a large outage of their entire network. Now, one of the things that I want to kind of just make sure that we talk about, right, is if you've followed into the Twitter stream that we did the other night, where we talked about Twitter and we kind of digested the Twitter hack and everything else. One of the things that you'll remember that we brought up during the Twitter conversation was how transparent Twitter was and how forthcoming they were that they had experienced a cyber event and a cyber incident. One of the things that we're starting to see here with the Garmin attack, and I'll just jump right into that, right, is that Garmin hasn't officially acknowledged that there's been a ransomware attack. The only reason that we know that there's been a ransomware attack inside of Garmin was actually due to several employees posting up on Twitter and posting to social media that there had been a ransomware attack. Before we get too specific into Garmin, I just want to level set with all of our viewers, especially if we have viewers of mixed skill sets that are joining the stream. I want to really quick just kind of talk about ransomware real quick and make sure that we are all on the same page when it comes to ransomware. When we talk about ransomware, at its core, ransomware is a piece of malware that when it runs on your computer, it goes out and looks for, documents, pictures, Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoints, things like that on your computer, and uses a cryptographic or a mathematical algorithm basically to encrypt those files or encrypt your hard drive on your computer. And the idea is that the attackers are basically using, basically holding your computer ransom, basically, and holding all those files ransom from you. And typically they ask for some level of money when it comes to that. And so in exchange for you paying them some money, they then allegedly give you keys to unlock that ransomware so that you can gain access to your files all over again. And one of the really common ones that we oftentimes talk about when we talk about ransomware was the big WannaCry one, because that's such a prevalent really kind of in your face piece of ransomware that we got hit with back in 2017. And so I kind of show you this as kind of a generic screen as to what some of the common characteristics are on a ransomware screen that you would see as a user if you got hit with ransomware, right? And so you can see that there is, on the left-hand side of this, there's a time period with which you have to pay the ransomware. So if you remember from some of our previous streams when we talk about social engineering and kind of the social psychology tactics that are there, right? It's giving you that sense of urgency, so that that if you don't pay by this amount of time, then all your files are lost and you can't ever recover them. And so it's to give you that sense of urgency so that you'll pay it. If you've also paid attention to some of our streams as we've talked about Bitcoin here, you'll kind of notice the Bitcoin address that we've got down here, kind of at the bottom of the picture, where they're asking you to send about $300 worth of Bitcoin to this address. With all that being said, I mean, Bitcoin, or excuse me, not Bitcoin, but ransomware, and I'd have to go back and find the specific, article, but I think it was something around the tune of a multi-billion-dollar, almost a $2 billion industry around ransomware. And so, with that being said, right, as we jump into this Garmin, this ransomware, since this is pretty new, and Keith, I know you deal with ransomware on a pretty regular basis, don't you? I mean, you or at least you're exposed to it.
I mean, yeah, I'm exposed to the topic. I do want to keep my finger on the pulse as to what's relevant, what's happening, and just to step back a little bit. It's sad, but when we're in a state where when you see a ransomware attack like this, we're almost numb to it because it's a near weekly occurrence these days. So yeah, ironically, this is the first time I had heard of this specific variant of ransomware, which is wasted locker.
So it's amazing that you bring up the frequency in which this was. So for those who tune into my podcast that I do with eLearn Security, literally on Thursday when we taped that podcast, Keith, we were talking about the ransomware that hit Venezuela, right, where they were paying that $7.5 million, which I think to date at least is the largest ransomware payout. I think to date that most people have seen. And so I think you're right. We're really talking about, I don't want to say commoditization, but it's almost the over commoditization of ransomware, in our space. It's happening on a weekly basis.
Yeah. And from what you're seeing here, I mean, Garmin is not a small company. So, I mean, anybody can fall victim to this.
Yeah. What I think will be interesting that comes out of this, right, is, hopefully we'll get some details out of Garmin. You heard me say this during like the Twitter hack, right? Which is, hopefully these companies tell us how this happened. We may not. With Garmin, most of the services went down, right, Keith, with this when they were talking about it?
Yeah, I was reading the report that I'm sure everybody has access to, probably that same one you're scrolling for now. One of the things that was really intriguing was that there's pilots that use the Garmin flight app, and they didn't have access to that. So, I mean, that's kind of concerning. I don't think it's going to be like commercial level pilots, but still, I mean, if you've got pilots operating an aircraft and they can't access that flight plan, that's pretty scary.
So I was reading about that too, and yeah, I think the specific section you were talking about, right, is the systems that were impacted by this ransomware were the systems that allowed pilots to file their flight plans online and get those flight plans approved, and that is actually an FAA requirement for those pilots. And so without even that ability to have those FAA flight plans approved, that kind of poses almost some regulatory problems when it comes to this type of ransomware infection, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you're starting to impact a company's ability to abide by regulations, federal regulations, yeah, you've caused some problems there. And this particular group that is responsible or claiming responsibility for this, Evil Corps, otherwise known as the Drydex gang, that's a Russian-based cybercrime group.
Now you're definitively calling it Russian based. Is what this gets into a conversation of attribution, right? Like how are you defining it as a Russian based cyber gang?
Well, that's what it's being attributed to, pretty much in every security blog that's talking about this wasted locker ransomware and its attribution to Evil Corps. They're all saying that it's Russian based. And they've been around since 2007. And like before this, Drydex, but they're linked to Locky. Okay. We all remember Locky from about 5 years ago. So
in this case then, so you're saying that this Evil Corp's been around since 2007, right?
Right.
So why,
at least 2007.
If we know this much about them, why can't we just go arrest them?
Well, there's probably some three-letter agencies that could probably answer that better than I can. The stuff gets tricky and sticky at that level. One other thing to think about too is the U.S. Treasury Department officially sanctioned this group in December of 2019. Okay, for using Drydex to cause more than $100 million in financial damages. So due to this, if Garmin decides that they do want to pay that ransom, they might potentially be violating United States sanctions.
That's actually a really good point. So just really quick though for our users though, right? Is Drydex a piece of malware or is Drydex ransomware?
From what I know about it, it's malware.
Okay.
I don't know that it's officially.
So we're thinking, more along the lines of like just a piece of malware that's typically steals credentials, steals identities and things like that, right? Just run of the mill commodity malware. So these these guys graduated from just commodity malware into the ransomware game.
Well, they were doing Locky back in 2015, so
ransomware, then malware, then back to ransomware,
then back
to ransomware. So I think you brought up an interesting point, right? So right when we talk about the sanctions list, right, we're talking about OFAC, we're talking about we're talking about the ability to kind of pay that ransom, and whether that's a violation of U.S. sanctions or not. I think that's a really good point, right, in terms of how the cyber insurance companies now are dealing with things like ransomware. And so one of the things that I've had the privilege of working quite closely with over the years, right, is with cyber insurance companies. And there's actually a pretty good marketplace out there, right, of cyber insurance companies that are offering this ransomware, kind of pay service, right, when it comes to, hey, if you get hit with ransomware, you can use us as a middleman. We've got Bitcoin or Monero or whatever the case is. And when that happens, you can use them as an intermediary and pay that ransom. And so it sounds like what you're saying, Keith, though, is, that could potentially be a violation of those sanctions.
Right. I mean, they might knowingly or unknowingly have to break a law if they want to pay this ransom.
So then how do you as a company deal with that then? What do you do? What do you do with that?
You work extremely close with the federal government. I would imagine that's the only thing they can do.
So your feeling on this matter, right, is that this is an area where you have to cooperate with the federal government.
That's my belief. Yes. Just because there's laws involved. I mean, you can't go around breaking the law. It's tough to say, and I'm not in that position where I'm a company who's been ransomed, and it's a terrible thing. I do feel genuinely bad for Garmin. But there has to be protocols in place for situations like this, where the government is going to step in and send the best of their best.
I guess I guess I kind of look at a company like Garmin, right? And the question then becomes is do they not have backups, right? I mean, if they're seriously considering, which I think I've read that they're seriously considering paying this ransom, then you really kind of have to ask yourself, right, is do they not have backups to which they can rely on to recover their assets from?
Well, I think they showed their hand when you say they're seriously considering. That tells me they probably don't have backups.
And I think that kind of goes as a lesson, right? Whether you're a home user, right? Whether you're a corporate user, whatever the case is, right? I think backups are key, right? I think there's almost no reason to in most cases. If you're a home user, right? If you're listening to this stream and you're not a cyber person, right? You're just interested in cyber. You've got things like iCloud, Google Drive, OneDrive, Box.com, Dropbox, whatever the case is, right? Back your stuff up to those online storage things. If you're listening to this and you're a CISO or a CIO or a cyber person inside of an organization, right? Then I think your backup strategy becomes incredibly important, right?
Well, back to the home side of things, you can get a 12 terabyte drive for like $240. There's no excuse anymore to not back things up.
Yeah, but 12 terabytes. Most home users don't need 12 terabytes.
Well, future proof.
I was gonna say you can probably get away with 1 terabyte for like $70. You can probably get away. I think most people can get away with a thumb drive with most of the pictures that they have, if they really needed an offline storage.
I'm just saying, 12 terabytes for $240. That's kind of a bargain.
Yeah, I think the point you're trying to make, though, right, is the price per terabyte now these days is incredibly low. The price to back up your stuff is incredibly low.
Right. I mean, I'm not advocating this or companies go do this, but smaller companies can afford a 12 terabyte drive.
Smaller companies being like mom and pops. Do you think there's any risk of an attacker placing malware on a computer and encrypting that removable storage?
You already know the answer to that. Absolutely, 100%. If that drive is accessible by a computer and it's networked, 100%. But what would you rather do? Not back it up?
I think you do want to back it up as a user. I do think this gets back to it, right? I think iCloud storage, right? I think 5 gigabytes is almost $5 a month or something like that, and I don't know how much like Box and the free storage of Box and Google Drive is, but I think the point we're trying to make here very much is with how prevalent ransomware is, whether you're a consumer, whether you're a corporation, right? I think that you should take your backup strategy very, very seriously.
Oh, absolutely. It's yeah.
Okay.
You can't afford not to.
Oh, we'll continue. We'll continue to watch this unfold. Ransomware is ransomware, as you can tell, is not going anywhere. The money behind it is too good. I think this also brings up, right. I think for listeners who aren't aware, who don't know, right. You can actually do ransomware as a service, right? So out there on the darknet, on some of those darknet forums, right, you can actually pay to have ransomware a ransomware variant built for you, and then have that ransomware deployed in some cases to a company or to an organization, and attempt to collect that ransom. I think that they pay like a 10% fee or something like that to the malware creators, to actually basically try to help and accomplish that ransomware as a service type thing.